And I said, yes, that would be on your resolution. So maybe you should just start by talking about this person. I don't imagine there'll be any. And then Judy's going to check hers will take a while. And then it moves to another report on where apparently they didn't get any success with our contract with Dog. I was going to start the meeting now. We have a quorum, and we have a big agenda. So, this is a meeting of the General Services Committee to consider 4 items.
So I just added it.
The first item we were going to consider is Resolution 56-6221, the honorary naming of a street in honor of Charles Straham. That's by Councilmember Kimbrough. Then we were going to discuss the Woodlawn Park situation. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. First item to be discussed is going to be the honorary street renaming. Second one will be the Woodlawn Park situation. Okay. Then we will discuss the ordinance involving trees and also a update on the legislation we passed involving sidewalk cleanup at critical intersections with sidewalks. And I know an RFP was issued, and DGS was going to report on what the results of that were and what their plans are for addressing that problem. So we'll start with Kelly and his resolution, 56-6221.
Okay,
Mike, sorry for the record, Mike, you're gonna do attendance so we have a quorum?
I can't hear
Are
it.
you gonna do an attendance so we have a quorum? Are you gonna do an attendance? Do an attendance for a quorum. Who's present?
Oh, yes. Present are committee members, myself, O'Brien, Kathy Fahey, and Jack Flynn. Also present are Councilmember Judy Burchett, and also Council President Corey Ellis, and Councilmember Kelly Kimbrough, and our legislative staff, JR, Danielle, and our 2 new interns. So anyway, Kelly will start with the resolution.
Okay, thank you. So the resolution is 56-6221, honoring the life and legacy of Charles Chucky Trainum and renaming a portion of Mohawk Street after him. This was actually brought to me by the Sons of Arbor Hill, which I thought a few of them would be here to speak, and I'm sure they could speak more passionately about Mr. Trainum than I could. But he was a founding member of the Sons of Arbor Hill, and that group did a lot of community work, worked on a bunch of campaigns for legislators of color here in the city, and it just was basically, based on all accounts, a treasure and to the community. Again, the Sons of Arbor Hill, which he was a member of, actually brought this to my attention and requested that we name this street in honor of him.
We have Bill Trudeau here from Traffic Safety, who also handles street signage. So I'd ask Bill if he'd come up by the microphone. And do we know exactly where the signs are going to go? I mean,
Yes, Mohawk Street. It's on Mohawk between Broadway and the street below Broadway. Broadway. Wait, no, it's below. Thank you for that, Bill.
Yeah. No, I think you're going to have to move that mic right in front of your mask. The mic has got to go close.
How's that? Better? Is it on? Is it on?
I don't know. Is that on? It doesn't sound.
All right. Is that better? So Mohawk Street is 1 block long between North Pearl and Broadway. Yeah, from Broadway.
Basically,
Yep.
Pearl down to Broadway.
We have no problem with it. From
Okay.
a sign making or sign placing, that's not a problem. The only thing we would need is scheduling for the dedication. Whenever we're gonna,
I'll handle that.
you'll handle that with the mayor's office.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Sign production's not a problem. We can do that.
Kelly, is there anybody here in the public that wants to comment on it?
I don't see any of the Sons of Arbor Hill that I thought would be here.
Does any council member have questions or comments on it?
Nope.
I would make a motion for a favorable recommendation on Resolution 566221.
I second.
Kathy Fahey is seconding it. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So our next topic is a discussion on Woodlawn Park. Councilmember Dochette has prepared a PowerPoint, which she's going to give us, and then we have DGS representatives. We have Joe Gleebelhaus, Sergio, and Frank Fioli. I'm going to have Judy do the PowerPoint first, and then if you folks would then be able to
We
comment.
turn off the air. I just want to make sure DGS is fine with me going ahead with the PowerPoint first, or do you have anything that you want to share with us? All right. All right. Thank you very much. So I want to thank everybody for being here, and I look forward to this opportunity to talk in person about the concerns I have had about Woodlawn Park behind National Little League left field. I was appreciative of the fact that last year DGS did a lot of work on the main part of the park, and then I had also asked them to clear out 10 feet from the National Little League fence, and they went above and beyond. However, when I went down there and I was looking around at the amount of debris, trash that had been plowed under, I was very concerned. I then walked the area with Deputy Commissioner of Parks, Justin Atlas, and he pointed out some other issues to me. And with that meeting in late October, I realized that there were potential issues of hazardous substances, including asbestos in the park. I reached out to DGS in various forms, in person conversation, and also a variety of emails. In many cases, I copied David Gallen of the mayor's office because I expressing concerns about how the area, that area had been left with trees and debris. And of special concern was the fact that there were a lot of black plastic heavy-duty construction bags that were partially buried in this area, especially directly behind the National Little League left field fence. And then I also realized that the tiles, the floor tiles there that were broken and getting more broken with lawnmowers, et cetera, it was, and equipment going through there might have asbestos. And indeed, eventually, after 9 times of reaching out to DGS in various ways, 5 of those times raising the issue of hazardous waste, the construction bags, and the possibility of asbestos, I finally got to the point where I picked up some of the specimens, which, by the way, if I can have one of the interns share this with Mr. Ellis and Mr. Kimbrough, this is the kind of thing that got tested. Ethan, could you bring this over to Mr. Ellis? So this is exactly the kind of thing that I had tested, and indeed the report did come back positive. There apparently is no dispute that there was asbestos, because here is a notice of abatement that appeared on the next door neighbor's wooden fence in the first week in August, apparently on August 6th, and actually giving notice of asbestos abatement. I lose sleep over this. This is where our kids play. It's right next to National Little League. We've done a lot of work on the playground there. There's been a lot of activity there. And just for the record, I took this from the Cleveland Clinic with regard to what are the effects of asbestos exposure: lung cancer, mesothelioma, cancer of the gastrointestinal tract, kidney, etc. And this is from the New York State Department of Labor website, where it's a question and answer. Is there any safe level of exposure? There's no known safe level of exposure to asbestos. Any exposure can cause illness. This is why I take this very seriously. I've mentioned some of the timelines that I reached out 9 times before finally sending a letter to the mayor, mentioning the issues of hazardous substances and other concerns. I offered to meet with staff, both Parks and Rec and DGS, at various times, at least 4 times during that time. And the only person who took me up on that was Justin Atlas, as I noted before, who walked the area, and we uncovered some other issues. For that 8 months, no one else in DGS, Parks, or David Gallen even acknowledged that any of the issues that I was raising needed to be addressed. I got one email from, at least one email from DGS saying, our work is done, we exceeded the scope. Even though I kept on coming back and saying, well, there's a broken flat screen TV in the park. There's construction debris, there are these bags, and then there's these tiles that I suspected have asbestos. After the administration received my June 8th letter, it's quite frustrating that not one person in the city administration spoke to me, even though I'm the one with all the information on this, that I've been looking at it, studying it. I've walked the area many times before this work was done. I know it was there. No one ever addressed any of the issues that I was raising and acknowledging that there was something that needed to be done. After on June 9th, David Gallen emailed me saying he would respond after he checked with staff. I received no response after that whatsoever. I became aware of the fact that work was being done. I had asked to be advised of what the plans were. Nobody advised me of the plans. Frank Zioli emailed me on June 15th saying he would circle back after the test results came in. He never did. So here's a picture of Woodlawn Park from the main part of the park looking towards Providence Avenue. And this fence was put up 3 days after I sent the letter, and it says in David Gallen's update that he finally provided on August 16th after I reached out to him and I said, they're putting down dirt in this area, what's going on? He didn't take the call directly, but he then sent me an email. He says that on 6/11, a Department of Labor certified asbestos inspector was on site and fencing erected around the area in question. Problem is that this picture shows an area that the fence was put around, an area which I had not raised concerns about there being asbestos in. And indeed, the grassy area along the left field fence is the area that I had collected the specimens from, and is the area where I've taken most of the photos. And then there's one tree along here where there is one bag of a heavy-duty construction bag. So once I saw where the fencing was put, I sent an email to the mayor, her staff, DGS, and Parks saying the fence is in the wrong location. It isn't addressing the areas that I'm raising concerns about. And at that point, I was the only person with a specimen that had tested positive for asbestos in the grassy area that people were not protected. This was also 2 days after the contractor, now that I see the timeline, 2 days after the contractor had been on site, apparently collecting samples, apparently in the wrong location. I don't really know for sure because, after all, I've asked for information and details about where the work was done, and I asked to be advised of what work was going to be done, and I have not been advised of that. Despite my pointing this out, not one person contacted me to get clarification as to the locations of the asbestos and the buried garbage bags, or to provide me with any clarification of what the city's plans were. On June 15th, when Frank Zioli had told me that he was going to loop back with me, I said, I'm trying to make sure that the testing is being conducted in the right place. And then I offered to come down and show the inspectors the tiles that I had and show them where I had found it. And I specifically noted I'm really hoping the plan does not leave all of those heavy-duty construction bags and broken tiles and their contents in the ground. I got no response to that, and no response was forthcoming for 2 months. This is an email that I received at 11 o'clock Monday night after I had reached out, after the work was done. This is the sum and substance of what I have been told by the administration about what they have done, not what their plans were on this. I noticed that there's no mention of removal of black construction bags. I have asked for public documents, the inspector's report, the lab report, DOL variance application, RFP, the successful bid, work plans, site diagrams. I have not received that. It's obviously available and should not be too much to be asking after me waiting for 2 months for the administration to tell me what is being done. I have provided, oh, by the way, Ethan, you want to pass out the PowerPoint, both PowerPoints? I'm providing an addendum PowerPoint that actually provides details of the many exchanges that I had with DGS trying to get them to act on this. After writing to the mayor on June 8th, twice I offered to meet to clarify the locations of the concern. No one contacted me to discuss my concerns or get clarification of the issues or the locations of the issues. And as I say, I have not been provided with any updates as I had been promised 2 months ago. Questions that this raises, and there's more in my PowerPoint, but at this point there are questions about why no action was taken for 8 months while I was raising concerns about asbestos and the hazardous, unsafe, and unsightly conditions behind National Little League left field. And I am hoping that DGS will answer that question. I'm wondering if this is an appropriate way to remedy significant public and health safety issues without even talking to the person with detailed knowledge. And I have a question as to whether the mayor and her commissioners and direct staff consider it acceptable for DGS and others to repeatedly ignore reasonable requests from council members and members of the public about obvious public health safety issues, and then not inform council members of the plans to remediate an issue. I'm also wondering why the RFP and the plans were not provided to me, that I wasn't made aware of the variance or anything else, and why am wondering when I'm going to be provided with that information. Again, so with regard to this issue on asbestos and hazardous waste remediation, this came about because there was garbage bags in the area that were bulldozed that partially ripped out open some of the garbage bags, and obviously some of them have been buried. Some of the tiles were spread around the park behind the National Little League fence, and those bags have not yet been removed. Here's another question. Is it acceptable for city employees to bulldoze black construction bags into the ground in a city park and leave them, especially then when becomes known that some of them contain asbestos tiles? So I'm going to show you some files, some photos. These two photos this photo was taken in May of 21. You can see all these white pieces. The reason why I provided the hard copy sample is to show you that that's what these things then wound up looking like. On the right you can see in the center of this picture a black thing. That is a plastic bag that is partially sticking out of the ground, and one in which early on I tried to see if I could remove. Here's another one covering an area about 20 by 10 feet right behind the National Little League left field fence. I've circled where there is the top of a black construction bag in the upper right-hand corner here. There's more, on the left is more evidence of tiles. On the right, clearly another black construction bag, partially buried in that area that has not been removed. And here's another one. On the right-hand side now, bringing us up to date, there's a lot of grass in this area, and so on August 15th, once I realized that DGS was probably planning on bulldozing, covering over this area, I went into the site and I took photos. Here's one of a construction bag still evident. One of the things that happened during this time, before this time, is DGS was going in with riding lawnmowers, and a lot of times you would see little pieces and shreds of the tops of the black plastic bags then being shredded off. So in some cases, the tops of these bags have gotten lower. Again, 2 more examples. This is from the mesothelioma website. When you're talking about outdoor asbestos remediation, outdoor asbestos abatement may involve significant digging to access buried materials, and that is what I had anticipated would happen. Here is the National Little League left field pole line. So the samples I provided you came from this particular area. On the right-hand side here, you can see what it looked like in May of 2021. On the left-hand side, you can see what it looked like on August 15th, 2021, the day before this area started to be covered with topsoil. There was no digging in this area, as you can see. According to David Gallen's timeline, the environmental firm came in and did their work on August 6th. They were there, they left, they were done, whatever it was that they did. But they clearly were not digging in this particular area and removing what you see on the right-hand side here. This is a photo of taken on August 16th, obviously the day that DGS crews were spreading the topsoil. This entire area is the area. As you can see, there's the shed on the right. There's the pole line, the foul pole line in yellow immediately to the left of the shed. That's all an area where there had been, I had taken pictures of, and I've only provided a sampling. I've got an iPad filled with these pictures, but that's where there were broken tiles and more signs of buried construction bags. So that's it on that, on that as an issue, and I'd be glad to take questions. I do want to point out that another issue that I've asked the city to address is these downed trees that are in the park and stumps. So these pictures were taken in May of 2021 and provided to the mayor. Here's a major stump in this area along with major branches. Some of this pre-existed what DGS did, and some of it happened later on. And this is the area on August 16th. And so my question is this what the mayor wants our city parks to look like, with these downed trees and branches in these areas that have existed since October of last year? Here are some stumps that I included in my letter to the mayor that create tripping hazards. By Monday, these seemed to have been covered over with topsoil, but whether there was enough topsoil to keep them from being tripping hazards, I have no idea. I also asked the mayor in my June 8th letter to remove all blankets, sheets, clothing, beer cans, food containers, plastic bags, bottles, broken bottle pieces from throughout the part of Woodlawn behind the private fences. So this is an area that is, there are a bunch of houses along Woodlawn Avenue, and they have fences butting up to, their rear fences butt up to Woodlawn Park. And there was a lot of garbage in that area immediately behind those fences going over to Providence Avenue. And while a lot of garbage was removed by DGS on June 9th, these are photos that I took on June 10th. I was a little alarmed to see this particular piece of glass was not removed from the park, and again is part of my concern about kids following foul balls or fly balls over into the Little League field or exploring in this area. This is something that should have been removed, and I had looked forward to the opportunity to talk to the administration about what was not done on June 9th in the way of garbage pickup. Here's some more photos taken the day after the crews did pickup. These two photos are actually of items that appeared in my June 8th letter, but were to the mayor, but were still in the park on June 10th. The item on the left is a shredded blanket, and the item on the right is some sort of, I think, metal grate or plastic grate. And here's some more items. And I am concerned that there's a bit of an attitude, maybe, that they don't have to pick up everything that might be dangerous or a concern in city parks. And so my question is, if these were left in front of City Hall or in the DGS parking lot at One Connors Boulevard, would DGS remove them? And why is it acceptable to leave them in a park? And finally, I note that back in April or May, there were a lot of items that are similar to some of these items, blankets and plastic, et cetera, that were on Arch Street and needed to be removed by DGS, and that occurred within about a half an hour's time. So I'm wondering why this park, where we have kids, wouldn't get a similar kind of attention. These are pictures of cement that had been left in the park, that on June 10th, when a DGS worker was there, came along as I was taking pictures of other things. He was there to pick up fence posts with concrete footings, and I called to his attention these two areas, and he declined to pick these up. Never been told whether or not DGS ever addressed that. And finally, this is a picture of an old scoreboard, a wooden thing that is actually on the side of Woodlawn Park where the work has been done outside the Little League, and I have suggested that should also be removed as it's very pitted and rusted and unsightly. Questions about what is needed. In June 8th, I suggested that explicitly ask the mayor to retain a licensed asbestos removal contractor to completely eliminate all asbestos and all heavy-duty construction garbage bags and whatever their contents are from behind National Little League left field. This is a quote from that letter. This is what I asked for, and I'm not sure what was done with regard to any kind of remediation, because I haven't seen any reports, but it's very clear to me, based upon the photos that I took on August 15th, that there are still heavy-duty construction bags there, and more than likely they contain more asbestos tiles. I also asked the mayor to remove all limbs, vines, and stumps that were partially taken down by DGS and left on the premises. And this obviously still needs to be done. And then with regard to the garbage, I am hoping that more work will be done, especially in the wooded area where I saw quite a bit of evidence of that kind of garbage, in addition to the issue of the garbage that has been covered over right behind, in a large area right behind the National Little League fence. I also asked for the removal of the old fence posts. I'm thrilled that those were taken out. I know that that was a heavy lift, really, literally. But I am hoping that DGS will remove the cement blocks. I'm not sure if they already have. There's the issue of the old scoreboard structure. And my letter also asked for the large flat screen TV to be removed. something I had been asking for 8 months, and that was taken care of on June 9th, and that is very much appreciated because that was also a hazard. As far as other things that are needed, communicating with Common Council members when they raise issues. Advising Common Council members of specific plans before undertaking a project in their ward or that they have been involved in. I think that that would be appropriate. So that's the end of my presentation. I appreciate people listening, and I'd be glad to take any questions or comments.
I did have a procedural question. We have a representative here from the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association, and we are allowing public comment. I thought it might be beneficial to get the reaction of the Neighborhood Association before we hear from General Services.
I would prefer to hear from DGS actually first.
Okay, so are there any questions that the members want to ask of Councilmember Dochat? Kathy?
Well, that's true. Before I was down there last night, and I saw that the rest of the area has been talking about the area behind the living shed and the area behind the foul line. I'd held out some hope that maybe that area was left uncovered with topsoil because that was an area where there were a lot of tiles and a lot of evidence of buried plastic bags that obviously were not dug up, that I was hoping that maybe there were going to be follow-up plans in that area. But that area is now covered and everything is seeded.
Mike, I just have one question. It may be a DGS question, but you said you communicated with DGS. Did you communicate with Molly McGuire? The reason why I ask is she's very good about getting back to constituents and council members. So was it directly to somebody, or was it to Molly, or was it just a general email? That's why I asked.
No, I did not.
Good.
I did not touch base with her because I had been having conversations with Mr. Panuzio and Mr. Giebelhaus and Mr. Zioli previously about all the other work that was being done, and I considered this still, a left undone part of that project in an ongoing conversation.
So just so I'm certain, the area that was cordoned off and you were told was cleaned up was not the total area that you had pointed out that there was asbestos and other debris buried. And to your knowledge, that has not been cleaned up.
Oh, thank you. The thing that the sequence, now that I've seen it from David Gallen, is that the inspector had already been there on, the certified inspector had already been there on June 11th. And when I provided this clarification, nobody acknowledged that they were going to have that person come back and look at the rest of this area, since there clearly was some sort of misunderstanding about where the area of concern is. And even in David Gallen's email of August 16th, 2 days ago, he is saying that this was the area that on June 11th, this picture was, this fence was put up in the area of concern. So I don't know if they basically just humored me by putting the fence across, and that, whether they ever got back to that inspector, whether additional samples were taken, whether the work plan would have changed as a result of what I shared. I did in a follow-up email to Frank Cioli, who said, we'll circle back with you once we have the test results. I let him know I'm very concerned about whether or not the correct place was being tested here, and that's when I offered to go down and meet the person. At that particular time, I knew this fence was up in the wrong place. I didn't know the inspector had already been there, because nobody's telling me anything. If you look at the timeline also shows that on the 18th is when they got the test results from an out-of-town laboratory that I had used, and that laboratory, it took about 6 days for me to get the test results. So that coincides with, they collected on the 11th, and those are the specimens from this area of concern. So that's the information I have.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions at this time?
Yeah, just, do we open ourselves up for a lawsuit if we don't address this at the time we have?
I'm sorry, are we opening ourselves up for a lawsuit if we don't what?
Address this issue and the negligence on the city part, on DGS part, for not addressing this at the time we have?
Well, I think the city is on notice as a result of my having provided that letter, have provided all of this information to the city regarding buried bags that have not been excavated and removed from that area. And so, yes, and when I walked with Justin Atlas and we were talking about things, and I was saying, I'm trying to figure out what I can do, because the mayor on September 1st had said, Judy, the neighborhoods has to assist in all these activities and trying to clean up things. So we had done a lot, prior to that, and here we are, in October, and I'm saying, what can I do? And maybe I should just move these tree limbs into this ditched area down here. And he basically said, Judy, this is your legacy. You do not want to be responsible for filling things and doing a job poorly and contributing to that. At which point, I was a little frustrated because I wanted more work done, and I know DGS is busy. But at that point, I did then specifically, anytime volunteers were doing leaf raking in the park or anything, I directed them not to go beyond the center post of the National Little League thing, because I considered I would be potentially liable for sending people to do any cleanup in an area that I strongly suspected had hazardous materials in it. And I certainly knew that that area at that time, as Justin had pointed out to me, had a large flat screen TV, broken flat screen TV, along with a lot of other debris. So yes, I do think there is a lot of potential for liability because those bags clearly, some of those bags clearly contained, and possibly all those bags contained, these floor tiles. And they have not been fully cleaned up as far as I know. And well, and certainly from the pictures I took 3 days ago.
Thank you for the presentation. But also, my second question is also, you said something about TV being left there for 8 months. Do you believe that was intentional by DGS to ignore it, or just?
I'm sorry, I couldn't,
During the presentation, you said it was a TV that was accidentally removed, and it took 8 months before it was finally removed. Do you believe that the chair did that intentionally?
so I have a hard, I can't address what somebody's intentions are with regard to this. I know that DGS has a lot on their plate at any given point in time. I did my best to try and bring these issues to their attention, and my goal is, before I leave office, these issues will be addressed. We all know I tend to be a little bit relentless on things, and that's what I've been being, and I finally got to the point. I talked to Mr. Kimbrough about this as an issue in May, and he says, well, have you provided them, the mayor's office, with photos? And I said, I am now, I think at that point I was waiting for the result of the laboratory test, and then I did heed what he was saying in terms of providing the mayor with a letter. It takes a lot of time to create these letters. I'm not an expert, on PowerPoint presentations. I gotta send photos from here onto my PC, and then I gotta cut and paste and crop and whatever. This takes a lot of time, and frankly, I'm exhausted. And part of the reason why I'm exhausted is because I really do lose sleep over this, which is why I'm determined to make sure we make it right.
Mike, I just have one question. Judy, did you have any communication with Commissioner Jones? I didn't notice any of that in the presentation.
So many of my emails that I would send, I was mostly sending to Mr. Giebelhaus and copying others. And when I copied others, frequently it was just an atlas, but at least a few of these emails, I also kept Commissioner Jones in the loop. They have this, is a larger kind of project, which my understanding is it is not their responsibility, but I was hoping that they would chime in and advocate for doing the cleanup, investigating this further, and doing the cleanup.
Just for clarification, I believe that DGS has taken over all our costs, we've done last budget, so as it relates to maintenance and cleanup, I believe that it's DGS, is no longer in the parks department.
It is, but the actual playground equipment, that would be the domain of Justin Atlas and Jonathan Jones. But I think all the physical maintenance, yes. So, we have 3 folks from General Services. I was going to suggest that maybe you might want to, there's a chair, bring up 3 chairs.
I think we can speak loud enough up here.
Yeah, but this is a recorded meeting, and we'll pick you up. So why don't you bring your chair up? And you
Good evening, thank you. Good evening, thank you for having us here. We could dispute many of the PowerPoint presentation as to the timeline and events and how things happen and how they didn't happen. Our delay in acting was that perhaps my fault, since first of all, I want to reassure that what we're talking about is what's called friable asbestos, which is considered the lowest hazards that asbestos has in its content. Second of all, the tiles do not have asbestos. It's the glue that has most of the asbestos underneath when we had our test results returned by us. So the delay in October, when we first got it, the letter after we left, we had taken several pictures of the improvements, and we went above and beyond what Councilwoman Dozier has asked to do, and she was very happy. At one time, she was woo-wooing us in the park. When we have those pictures, we have no signs of asbestos. The TV was not there, so the TV was not there for 8 months. We left it in prime condition.
The TV was not left there for 8 months?
Not in the picture when we left the site. And that was late October. April, actually, late April. Then we hydro-seeded the park, and then even Mrs. Dozier came out on her own and seeded the park herself and watered the park herself. So at that time and point, there was never a mention of any asbestos or anything. When we first learned about the asbestos, and again, I fault myself, we do have a continuing contract for asbestos removal for the landfill. At that time, to expedite things, it made reasons to me to hire a contractor to remove the asbestos at Woodlawn Park. After several days, weeks, I was told, I forgot exactly who told me, it was either legal counsel or the actual contractor himself, that what it was asking to do was outside the scope of the contract. Their contract particularly is only for landfill equipment and landfill. So what I asked them to do would not be kosher under the law. So that's when I turned everything over to Joe Gablehouse, who has experience in landfill removal, and that's the timeline that we were shown. The contractor came in. For those who don't know anything about asbestos removal, they do a perimeter. They do a 20-feet area. As a matter of fact, our concern was that it was the beginning of Little League season. We were worrying about having to tell the Little League that they couldn't open, because if that 20 feet went over the fence, that would not be something that players could. So the radius that was done, that's why the fence was there at one time and then moved to another location, because of this radius that was told to us by our engineer, our environmental engineer. The environmental engineer, they had to get permission from the Department of Labor, because it's asbestos. They first ruled away, then they said, well, it's friable, it's not airborne, so it really poses a minimal risk. We chose to do air sampling. We didn't have to, but we chose to, again, to cite on the error of that cost us more, but we were able to do that. We wanted to do that, especially in the Little League field. As of right now, we are waiting for the last final manifest signed by the DOL, the Department of Labor, and the engineering, which should be shortly. I don't know when they're going to put it together, with the full report that the condition of the park only required the removal, which was removed, which was, my understanding, was very minimal. Took less than a half a day for the removal of the tiles. We don't know where the tiles came from. Like I said, when we left, well, I'll tell you where they came from. 20 years ago, somebody illegally dumped in a wooded area a kitchen, a renovated kitchen. That's what probably happened. But when we left late April, there was no asbestos, there was no bags, nothing showing. So now, Joe, you want to talk about the events?
Well, before Joe talks, Sergio, I have a question for you. Can we get a copy of the report that the cleanup people did, so we can be certain as to whether they did the right location? I'm certain that they show the exact location.
That's
but-
called a manifest. We haven't received that yet.
Well, Yeah,
That's our timeline. That's our timeline. But everything is checked by, now they gotta put a final report together.
okay, when do you expect that?
Whenever the DOL and our engineering, environmental engineering put it together, because there has to pass DOL regulations.
Right, and I'm sure the report is pretty meticulous as to what they did with the stuff, what they found, and where they found it. And I'd like to get a copy of
Yeah,
that
sure.
as soon as possible.
Part of a public record.
Because-
Whenever we get it, you get it.
Okay, because that would seem to answer some of the
The
questions.
concentration seems to be between the fence and the wooded area. And what's gonna happen is we're gonna put 2 inches of top, recommendation again from the DOL, and 2 inches of topsoil, we're gonna reseed that area, because they're removed. Then we're gonna put a fence around the wooded area, just like we do in other parks where we have other hazardous conditions. That wooded area, tree branches and trees that are there cannot be cleared, because that is the retention basin. If we do any movement to that area, we'll flood the National Little League and we'll flood the park.
Okay.
Everything is pitched to that
Because-
wooded area. So we're gonna fence that in, just in case there may be some other bag that might appear later on.
So, how did the Department of Labor know which area to inspect? Where did they get that information from to inspect?
We hire an environmental engineer.
Yeah, so,
He did his assessment. DOL came in and affirmed with him that his remediation plan was correct, and that's how the work was done.
do you know how many feet they inspected, yards?
It's 20-yard radius.
750 square feet.
700.
750 square feet. So, from Councilmember Shady's report, they have specific areas, and that specific area is not investigated. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, like, if she issues a complaint and a report, how does that not, like, how does somebody go out and just investigate when they don't know where the original complaint or area was? They just go out and look at an area?
The way we were explaining is, this is where the area is. 20 feet around that area has to be inspected, regardless of whether the you could have one bag sitting in one corner. It doesn't matter. This whole room has to be inspected. That's how it went.
But at this point, we don't know for sure whether they actually got to all of the possible contaminated area based on the information from the councilman.
The last conversation we had with our engineer and DOL was that we would get clean bill of the place has been remediated.
But you'll get the report for us, and we can see the specific, what they did, the procedures they followed, what they found, and where they found it. Sure. Joe, would you speak into a mic, because this is being recorded? Yeah, I guess that's not.
The scope of the remediation is twofold. Step one is to do, obviously, a visual check of what's on the ground, which is what they did. And the remediation is to actually pull pieces that they visually see. So we had a team there on their hands and knees, literally picking every piece that they could, including the leaves, debris, everything. Right? There's about 9 bags of waste that was generated from it. The next thing, because we don't know, it could be everywhere and anywhere in that general area, the directive was put 2 inches of topsoil over the entire area to encapsulate it, so it won't come to the surface again. So that's, we're doing exactly what was asked of us. Not by this body, but by the regulatory bodies. So again, we're waiting for a final report from our engineers to sign off and say we've done the work per the DOL requirements.
And normally, how long would it take to get that report?
It should be a matter of weeks.
Oh,
Should take us too long.
Because the council member said she got the sample that she collected, she got a report back in, I think you said 6 days.
That's lab results. Right. Yeah, there's the difference between friable and non-friable. Friable means it becomes airborne and you can consume it into your lungs. Non-friable is which the sample we have here, and every sample that we had, means that it's solid form and is not airborne. So there's a very low risk of ingestion and therefore a low risk of contracting mesothelioma. They're not in a solid state like that. You'd have to manually crush it, mechanically crush it, and then inhale the dust. But you have to get it to the point where you can actually consume the fibers into your lungs.
I see. And the other question is, it sounds like there was a section there that the asbestos removal code did not address. Only Councilmember negotiates and then later on, just after the last couple of days, the council did not area that they did not inspect.
They did.
Is that the case?
Again, no, that's not the case. The case was that they inspected from the middle of the wooden area to the fence and 20 feet around. That's what is required by law. So the path that we created for the children to walk through is inclusive on that 750 square feet. And well, this is a wooden area, so it's not connected with the playing field at all. Yeah.
I guess my issue, we have a complaint of an area. There's a complaint, there's a witness, this is where I've seen this, and the witness is not even asked, are we in the correct location? The witness is not contacted to make sure, like, oh, where did you see this? And they go out and they just do it. I don't understand, how did they pick the area they picked when the witness or the complainant wasn't even asked, like, what area is this in? Also, the second thing, I didn't see who was on that email, but our councilwoman, Judy Doche, had asked, can I see the report? I don't know if that was CC to DGS, but you guys come here today and tell us, oh, we'll get it when the Department of Labor gets it. But David Gallen didn't know that, so he could respond back to the council member, because that's the name I saw on it. He gives that report, but he couldn't respond back. There's the Department of Labor report is blah, 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 in a few weeks. He just doesn't respond back to her request.
But what David Gallen has is our timeline.
Yeah, he gave her the timeline.
That's what we have. We waiting for the official report.
I hear that.
From the
That's not my
licensed
point. So,
engineer.
I guess, Judy, you would have to, I didn't see who all was on that email. When he gave it his timeline, you said, well, I'd like to see the report, blah, 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 the RFP. Nothing was said. There was no response to her follow-up email. And then you come today and say, well, it was done, and we won't have the report because it takes a few weeks or whatever.
If I may, there was
Yes.
a response. There was a response.
Okay.
Cease and desist letter sent her on the 10th of June because she was digging in the park. All right. So
Which is not true. You were not there. Not true.
So
A false allegation was made.
yeah, right. The letter was sent that explained where we were in that letter.
That's how you become from
Okay.
friable to non-friable. If you expose it and you scratch it and it goes in the area.
May I jump in here? Mr. Zioli, I received that letter on December 10th, and it was on, June 10th, and it was on June 13th that I was letting you guys know about the location of the fencing, and your reply was, let us get the test results and I will loop back, we will circle back with you. I have that email. So you're now telling me that the letter on the 10th is the response that you assured me you were going to provide me on June 15th.
So one is something that the court just said, did we not get back to them? And we did. That letter on the 10th is getting back to them. What
But
she's talking
Frank,
about now is the court
Frank,
circle back. Circle
Frank,
back with me when the report comes, which has it covered.
Frank, I think the kind of response that the council member was looking for was not a stay away from the park response. It was an informational response. What do you have? What actions have you taken about the asbestos and the other situations? The cease and desist letter was pretty terse, as I remember it, and it didn't give a hell of a lot of information. It just said, don't do anything.
Why do we do this process?
I was there taking pictures. You have seen those pictures. I did not disturb items while I was there taking those pictures. There is a little bit of a disconnect when people are talking about there was no asbestos in April. So in April, you left the site actually back in October and November of 2020, and essentially there had been some mowing of that area after that. Here is a quote from an email to Mr. Giebelhaus on December 9th. I tried to talk to him when we were down talking about the Little League fence in late October or November about my concerns. I was negotiating getting an extra 40 feet of tall fence to protect the kids on the playground from fly balls coming over right field. And so when he did not want to go and take a look at the area like I had suggested so that we could walk it so he could understand my concerns, I decided I was going to fight one battle at a time. Here's a December 9th email in which I have said I'm looking forward to addressing the extra area DGS cleared behind center field and left field, removing more down branches, trees, 1-2 stumps, etc., and other debris. I did a lot of work this spring, and in amongst that, I was also sending emails saying, and I look forward to talking to you about this. I actually, before all of that, on, let me see if I can get this to go.
Was the 40 feet of fence ever installed? The additional 40 feet you requested?
Yes, and I was thrilled. I was thrilled about that. There's been a lot that is positive, and yes, I was so thrilled when I stood on Woodlawn Avenue and saw what you guys had done in the way of clearing things. And then when I went into that area and I saw, I gotta say, the mess. I mean, Justin Atlas pulled out a piece of metal that was sticking out of the ground this high, and I asked him to remove it when we were there. It was just left there. Piece of metal sticking out of the ground, something for people to trip over, something for kids to, potentially take, whatever. And there were attempts at pulling up some of the plastic bags that were there. On February 6th, I sent an email to Mr. Giebelhaus asking for an opportunity to meet. I did copy Commissioner Panuzio, Jones, the city engineer, Deputy Commissioners Atlas and Zioli, and David Gallen, asking to meet to talk about other issues and what we need to do in order to establish more grass in that area. That was on February 6th. And in it, I raised the issue, this is the attachment which I suggested as an agenda. Heavy plastic bags with construction debris had been partially plowed under, and I suggested that maybe some of our asbestos bonding that Randy has could be used, since the tiles very likely have asbestos. That is February 6th. I'm not making that up. You're saying there was no asbestos in April. What did you do? Did you do an abatement that was illegal?
No, we didn't do an abatement illegal. We left the place ready for seeding, and we seeded it. There was, in the pictures that we have, that when the job was closed, technically, we don't see any asbestos. There's nothing coming through, in and out. We didn't bulldoze anything. We removed 8 truckloads of tree branches and tree stump. That's what we did. We didn't bulldoze these bags. I don't know where these bags came from, but we didn't do it. And when we left, the park was ready for overseeding to make the park available. Then, all of a sudden, this asbestos appears. Granted, it was there for years, and you didn't put it there. I'm not accusing you of anything, or I'm not accusing anyone in this room to do anything, but it was apparently an illegal dump years ago. When we got the asbestos, we started the process. But when we left, the fence was up that you requested, the sidewalk were done that you requested, the garbage cans were done that you requested, the benches were changed as you requested. Everything that you requested was done. We left the park with a clean bill of health. All they needed is for the water to hit the seeds and grass to grow.
So that's true for the main part of the park. For the part that is behind right field National Little League, I did not ask you to do as much as you did in the other area. I simply asked for a swath of, I believe it was 10 feet from the National Little Field, so that kids could get back there.
We want to accommodate, make that area.
There was an issue of there being a hangout back there, something that there was a homeless thing, yeah, that I think somebody had raised from Little League, and I passed on that comment, and the police were looking into that, and I think that might have been also a concern. Overall, it's an improvement, but there is this outstanding issue, and I don't think the issue is, I don't think we should be quibbling about what was done with regard to asbestos removal at this particular point in time, except for my big concern is there are and were heavy-duty garbage bags. And I understand why you would dispute that the bulldozers had anything to do with them being buried, but the bulldozers were in that area. And I don't know how else these would have been wound up, buried in a way other than the bulldozer and all this tile and shards all over the place, other than through the bulldozer. That was evident in the end of October of 2020, shortly after I was rooting for what you did. And I was thrilled, and I was continuing to, negotiate and trying to, cajole Joe to, give me that extra fencing, and that was very much appreciated, and people have commented on it. People love what we've done with the park, but that doesn't mean I can rest easy knowing that there are these plastic garbage bags, and that is what I expected. Somebody would come in and dig up that stuff and then put down clean fill. In that area, it's about a 15 by 50 foot area in particular where there were a lot of these evidence of these garbage bags. As I say, there's a lot less evidence of that because over the months, as the lawn was being mowed, there were shreds. A lot of those bags that were sticking out of the ground got shredded. You would see little pieces here and there. And my strong suspicion is the tiles came into the park in heavy-duty construction bags because wherever those shards were, that's where there was pieces of construction bags sticking out of the ground. So we don't know that, what's in those bags, but the problem is it's reasonable to assume some of them have asbestos tiles, and in any case, we should not be a city that finds it okay to simply have heavy-duty plastic garbage bags being partially buried, whatever their contents are, in a city park. And that's what I want to see in particular cleaned up that will allow me to sleep better at night.
I agree with you. My first initial thought was to do exactly what you said, send 2 or 3 laborers or equipment guys and dig it up. Our engineer firm said if I were to do that, I would go to jail. I agree with you that city parks should not have bags with asbestos in it or any type of comment. I agree with you. But I also insist that we must do it legally by a certified, knowledgeable, competent engineer, not just by sending DGS and put a Band-Aid on it, which would be illegal.
Well, again, if you look at my letter,
If you give me some time, the matter has been resolved. We are waiting for a final manifest that the area is safe and clear under the current state and federal laws for asbestos, for friable asbestos removal.
did any of the correspondence, any of the site plan, talk about the removal of these, or an investigation into the plastic bags? Did they mention these heavy-duty?
That's part of the process. That's part of the process. We will get the results of the chemical composition. That's part of the process. We're not going to discover where they came from. It was a black and gold and white kitchen, which is pretty ugly in my opinion, but that's what the tiles were. And like I said, 20 years ago, somebody stood there and broke them up. That's when it becomes friable. I feel sorry for the guy that did that 20 years ago. Put it in construction and back up the truck and dumped it in the goods.
Just from a layperson's viewpoint, if there are these bags which have these tiles, and there's only the 2 inches of stuff on top, it just seems like, they will come up pretty quickly.
They removed the found concentration. The found concentration, what she's talking about, the bags, that was removed by the licensed asbestos contractor. So they're removed, and they inspected the area. So they said, all we have to do is now cap it with topsoil. If they ever pop up again, we will call him back, now that we know the process, and remove that concentration. But remember that every time we do that, we have to do 20 feet around because it's friable to be on the air. So what I'm hoping to get is a full report, what I'll share with you all, that shows that the air was cleared, that the air is clear, that the asbestos has been removed. These 2 bags, I don't even think it amounted to a half a ton, which is less than 1,000 pounds. It was so minimal that it barely made the threshold of the Department of Labor standards for removal. Once we get the report, we will share it with the council, but I am told that the engineer we hired won't sign unless the DOL approves that everything was done as per the law.
Sergio,
Concentration of bags were removed.
I got a question for you. When this contractor was doing the work that you requested, was there anybody from DGS there observing, taking pictures?
No, the engineer was. We hired an environmental engineer to make sure that the contractor was doing the job. He had to make sure that they were wearing the right equipment, they were wearing the right vests, they were wearing respirators, because that all goes into the report.
Well, here's my question. when you hired the engineer, when you hired the contractor, was there any presence from DGS at the site to make sure they were doing
Yes.
the right area?
Yes, at the very beginning, myself and Joe Gablehouse went there. We stood at the center where the highest concentration was and said, this is what we're talking about.
So between the three of you, you could tell us tonight exactly what areas were cleaned up without having to wait for the
I'm
manifest.
telling you now that anything, the 20 feet from the Little League, back Little League fence into the wood, that whole area, is all cleaned up. And all we have to do is put a 2-inch topsoil, reseed it, and we're in conformance with the law.
And then we'll get the manifest and compare that.
That the other thing that we have to do is put a fence around the retaining, the wooded area, because that's a retaining, everything, if you can't see it from the pictures, but everything in that area is pitched to the wooded area.
Do any other council members have questions for the
Yeah, I do,
DGS
yeah.
team?
Also, I think Judy, from your report, you did notice the construction batch. When did you notice it? Was it in October or was it in December?
I first noticed them in October of 2020. At the very end of that month, I think, DGS had done a lot of work on the main part of the park in the very beginning of October, end of September, beginning of October, and I think that then they expanded. So I'm pretty sure that I walked that area towards the end of October of 2020 with Justin, and that's when I was focusing more on the amount of trash bags that were there, garbage, and other hazards, and noticed these tiles. They had been larger previously. I mean, it was more evident that they were tiles previously, but over time, they wound up in these littler, pieces from, trucks going in there and, other things, over time. I do want to go back to this particular slide here. Again, these are slides that were taken about 20 feet out from the shed and the Little League left field pole line, where there's clear evidence of buried bags. And, on any of these, you go to tug at it, and you're going to get no give. You'll get, a little ripped piece or something like that. So it's not like it's just something sitting on the top of the soil. It is something that is substantial.
Because when Judy brought it to attention, she mentioned it was suspected of asbestos. We can't touch it. We're not licensed collector, we're not even licensed transport.
And you communicated that to Judy and saying that, hey, we're going to hire somebody to come take a look at it. Because when these things happen, we have to respond to our constituents. Did you communicate that to Judy? Let her know that?
We told her that we were hiring an engineering firm. Originally, like I said, I originally thought that we could use a landscape engineering firm, which we couldn't, because that was outside the scope of their contract. But anybody in government knows that anything that we do, it's not fast. Government does not react fast. First of all, we had the hurdle of overcoming the winter. Then we had the hurdle of overcoming, because we had to go back in the spring to finish the fence. The fence wasn't finished until late spring, because we couldn't even get the material because of COVID. We just got it in time for the season opening of the Little League. Then we have to overcome the process. We have to ask for 3 quotes. We have to ask for a license and that takes time. I just can't go and say, XYZ engineer will take this up. Anything in government takes time, and the delay, it's cost impounded by that delay. But as of right now, I think we're responding as best as we could under the condition we were under. Maybe not to any of the council or Mrs. Duchesne in particular expectations, but we've done everything law legally to protect the city, and we were anxiously awaiting for this report saying that the area is clear and playable and whatever it is.
If I can just jump in here, because I do want to provide this clarification. There was no work to retain somebody to do asbestos removal until after I wrote to the mayor on June 8th, just to be clear about that. Here we have an email I've provided.
Not true. We were already in the process. Like I said, I wanted to.
But on March 23rd, when I was again raising these issues, Joe Giebelhaus emailed me and said, DGS and Rec have completed the upgrades to the park and in some cases exceeded the scope. Sounds familiar, right, folks? DGS is not returning to conduct any more grading, construction, or modifications. We have moved on to other parks. DGS is down to maintenance-only activities. So that was in March and what I was being told, but I was still pushing the issue on this. And no one ever indicated to me, as I indicated earlier, no one ever indicated to me at any time that there was any consideration being given to doing any more work in this area of the park until June 8th, when I sent the letter. The next day, DGS was in there with a crew removing a lot of the garbage. And that's when they removed the TV. I do want to point out that I understand DGS not necessarily seeing the TV previously, because when Justin mentioned it to me in that walkthrough, I was like, there's not a TV. I thought it was some sort of plastic grill or, something, another piece of garbage or something like that. It was huge. And in an area with heavy leaves and vines and whatever, close to one of the rears of one of the houses. So I didn't believe him when he said that there was a TV there. So I had to go and look at it. So I had been in this area previously, so I understand them not having seen it. So, but I have to disagree strongly with the idea that that was not there when they finished in now they're saying April. I still think that they were kind of done in October or whatever, but.
Just really quick, I know there was a cease and desist letter that was sent to Judy, but she was digging up, you say that there's potential that she was digging up some asbestos. Was there any signage or block off that area for the public not to enter? Or did Judy help with the fence or help with something to dig up the asbestos that you're talking about?
At that time, no.
Say it again.
At that time, when this was at the very beginning of the project. At that time, when witnesses saw her digging, there was no fence there until we had, because we were waiting for the engineer to come in and direct us in where to put the fence.
So if I can also clarify what happened, and this is like playing operator here, and we don't have the first person testimony other than me. I was not digging, I was taking pictures of things, and I was suggesting to the DGS folks that while you're picking up, so thrilled you're picking up this fence post with the footing, there's these other concrete blocks. Well, I had my best buddy in the world with me, Tom, who we all know is Mr. Helpful. So he was on the side of the hill in amongst the trees where I never saw any asbestos or anything. And he was taking some of these concrete blocks and putting them up onto the grassy area for the DGS crews to then take them. So he did that with about 3 They pulled off. He stopped doing it. So that's what we mean by digging, is as best as Tom and I can figure out with regard, other than that, you saw the pictures that I took from that particular visit to the park.
So at this point, we did promise public comment, and Leah Goldie's here from Pine Hills Neighborhood Association. So Leah, can you come up? And you could probably sit anyway, because the DGS folks can stay there. But use the mic, otherwise it doesn't pick up on you.
No, that works.
No, that's all right. Can you hear me? Okay, hi. I'm Leah Golby, co-chair of the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association Zoning and Code Enforcement Committee. I actually, the Neighborhood Association was not paying, we had not been paying attention to the council committee meetings, and luckily somebody alerted me, someone from another neighborhood association early yesterday morning sent me an email, and so that's how we found out about this meeting. We certainly saw the article in the newspaper, and we circulate Councilmember Dosche's email updates, so we were aware of the situation. But normally, if the neighborhood association is going to make a comment on something, we decide on the language, and we simply didn't have the time to do that, but we wanted to be here because this park is in the boundaries of our neighborhood, and we do appreciate very much that Councilmember Doche has been very focused on Woodlawn Park for a long time, and all of the work that she has done and the assistance of DGS in helping to upgrade the park as well. And, in terms of the asbestos situation, it, of course, was disturbing for us to learn about. But we did, we did agree that I would say, and it makes sense to me now after listening to this meeting, which is why I wanted to hear DGS as well as council questions. We did agree that I would say that we do appreciate the work that DGS has done. I feel better knowing that there are these different grades of asbestos, things that lay people just don't know about. I personally still have concerns about the timeline of things. That's not a comment from the neighborhood association. That's just my personal comment. And I do hope that this type of situation doesn't happen again. I know, Pine Hills is fortunate that we're a large neighborhood association, and we have 3 parks within our boundaries. And 2 of them are usually pretty well kept. This is including Woodlawn Park. And one of them really is a struggle because of the area and the amount of people that traverse the area and that, leave their trash, all over the place. And, Madison Park is really, what the neighborhood association spends a lot of time concerned about the debris that's left in the park on a regular basis. Whereas Woodlawn, my daughter played there growing up. She played at Madison Park. She made the gamut of all the parks in the neighborhood, and and they all have their assets. I really want to thank the council for taking up this issue because it is really important, and also thank DGS for their work. And we're going to stay tuned.
as far as, this is not a case closed. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, we have other items on the agenda, but if there are any final questions regarding Woodlawn Park, please ask them now.
My-
Okay.
Right, can
Mike,
I just say something real quick? Just real quick, in relation to this, I think there's a big issue with communication here. Mr. O'Shea was asking questions and doing the work. And it sounds like DGS was doing some of the work also, but the communication back and forth needs to occur so folks know what's going on. And I would appreciate if, moving forward, that kind of communication not only happened with council members, but with citizens, because citizens make complaints and they need their things followed up on, and they need to communicate to them what's being done, because in the absence of information, people usually fill in their own, and it's not good. So communication needs to be better. Thanks.
So, my concern with DGS is more so with the leadership of DGS. On July 14th, I sent a message to the commissioner. In the message I said, 218 Quell Street is trash, is horrible for weeks. 484 Hudson, the same. 479 Hudson TV broken in front of for weeks. I put C-click fix. We also took a codes walk. This was my message to the commissioner. And this is the response that I got. With other members in the group message that was sent with David Gallen, Brian Shea, Frank Zioli was also in it, and other union members was also in that email. And this is the commissioner's response to my constituents' concerns. Today, we received an email from Councilman Owusu that several properties have been posted on C-Click Fix for by him for weeks and went unattended. The commission went to the list of addresses that I mentioned earlier and continue to say all fake news. Again, this is a continued campaign that certain council members have waged and launched against DGS. Again, this is a continued campaign that council members have lodged against DGS and its employees, even as far as calling a deputy commissioner and a supervisor incompetent in the middle of the street. I suggest that whenever Councilmember Owusu calls, please investigate first, then act as his statements have continuously been misleading at best. 2, for AFSB state Teamsters, operating engineers, and CSEA union representatives are included in this message. Please remember who our friends are. Please remember who our friends are. First of all, Commissioner, I just want to say, who do you think you are, Commissioner, to say something like that to a council member? And I did my research speaking to other council members, and this type of behavior has been here for a long time. There are other council members that you have threatened with being unions, and quite frankly, this is not New Jersey. That is unacceptable, and that is unacceptable, and that you're not going to treat the legislative body for the city that kind of manner, that kind of way. Second, to threaten me as a council member with unions, I've done more for the unions than you have ever done for the city of Albany. Just to be clear, before you got here, ask your workers who was there in the streets with them during the mayor's State of the City address, ask them for a wage increase. Ask them who organized your blue-collar workers when the mayor was having her birthday celebration. I did that. And to send that type of email to a council member is, quite frankly, unprofessional. And if this was the private sector, you would have been fired a long time ago. You know, I spoke to the mayor about this, and I was going to ignore it. But this continued behavior, speaking to other council members, and they have received that same email that you think is okay to send. It is not. It is not. Quite frankly, I was thinking about writing a resolution to show that I've lost faith in the leadership of DGS. And quite frankly, I had 8 council members ready to sign on. 8 council members ready to sign on. There are council members, even IGO, who has been an ally, have litter issue for a year and still haven't been able to respond. The same email that you sent me, I found out that 6 months ago, you sent the same thing to Michael Bryan, Councilmember Bryan.
Well,
That
not exactly the same.
Not exactly the same, but let me
But it did, it was similar, but we worked it out. I will say that.
And just
I
for
got
the-
back to DGS and we worked it out.
And just for the record, let me finish, and then you can say whatever you want to say. For the record, I want to thank, the rank and file of DGS, because I know that they're doing a good job every day ensuring that our city is taken care of. However, my concern is with DGS leadership, have to do with the unprofessionalism of management, particularly you three, and the culture that has allowed to fathom in this city. Where do you get the idea that DGS commissioners could correspond with elected officials in a condescending way, in a rude manner? Where do you get that from? I understand that we all have differences. You have to manage a large workforce, and we have to ensure our constituents' needs are being met. But that does not excuse rude emails or inflammatory language. I'm not sure who empowers you to send those type of emails to council members, but it needs to stop. There is a substantial amount of turnover in DGS, and many people, and you talk about morale, that council members are bringing morale down within your department. That is false, actually. You need to start looking in the mirror and see who's actually bringing morale down within your department. There has been huge turnovers regarding the department. Nobody want to stay. There's been vacancies, and you will think that it's because of the council members? And then you want to lecture us about morale within the council? We're bringing morale down within your department? There are stories that I hear all the time, Commissioner, particularly Rick LaJoy's cousin, a DGS worker, had cancer, did not get a single call from leadership. Not a single call from leadership to see how he's doing. And you think this council is bringing morale down within your department? And I want to end off by this, Commissioner. The resolution, I'm going to hold off on it. But if you disrespect another council member moving forward, I will bring it up and I will ask for the mayor to ask you to resign. If you do that again to any council member, again, I will bring that up, a resolution, and I will try my best, everything in my power to make sure that resolution passed. Because quite frankly, this is not New Jersey. You're not going to talk to any council member in any way you feel like. You're not going to do that. If council members are asking you to do something, it's not because we wake up in the morning on board and ask you to do some work. It's because we have calls, emails, being stopped in the streets by our residents, our constituents, for you to take care of something. And what's happening in Woodlawn is quite frankly unbelievable. It should not take that long to address a public health concern. Essentially, throwing council members' concerns under the rug. We represent the people. You are appointed by the mayor. Always remember that you work for the people. You work for the people. So I want you to answer these questions. Where do you think it's okay for DGS management to correspond with elected officials in a condescending and rude manner?
Yeah, can we, I
I will
appreciate it.
defend, I want to answer that.
He should
I will
You
defend,
answer all the questions.
I will defend, Mr. Owusu, you're right, I did send that email, but I did not send that to any other council member. As a matter of fact, some of the council member here have a pretty good relationship with me. I had it with you. But I'm going to send that email, and I'm going to defend when anyone, not only council people, deplores, discusses, demeans, underscores my men and women in the department. When someone lies, blatantly lies, that for 4 weeks that garbage was there, from a resident, you know who sent you that email.
Commissioner, the
You know
trash
who's,
was there. We didn't
you
say
know,
that
hold
we
on,
didn't
hold
secret-
on. You know who sent you that email.
Can,
And you know that resident lies, and you take that word as a word of God, transfer over to me.
Can-
Telling me, and you did tell my supervisor and my deputy
Can,
commissioner incompetent.
can we
You
wrap
did call
this
him.
up? This is not an agenda item.
No, but all I'm saying, Mr.
Maybe it has
Bryan,
to be
I've gotta
addressed
answer- I gotta-
at some other
You
time.
gotta give me the opportunity. He attacked me, he attacked my integrity, he insulted me. Maybe that's the way he conducts his business at home. But I gotta have the right to defend myself. I will, and I'll tell anybody that talks bad about my people, talks bad about my laborers. We have a more inclusive, more sexually inclusive, religiously inclusive, racially inclusive DGS today than we ever had it before. We have more people participating in the decision-making of DGS than ever before. But when somebody lies, regardless of who they are, I will stand up for my men and women that work very hard, because by having a resident lie and say that that garbage was there for 4 weeks, put it on see-click fix, which was never put on see-click fix, which was never put on see-click fix for 4 weeks, that's a lie. And I am sorry if I'm so, I am,
You know, I really think
I am
we
sorry
have to
that,
bring
I am
this to
sorry
a
that
close.
I have
This
offended
is,
you.
this is not an agenda item.
One second, let me
and
finish.
We have 2 more
Wait, let me
agenda
finish.
items to cover.
I am sorry I offended you, and I apologize for anyone here that I have offended. Maybe I have a little rough edge around. I'm not politically suave, as they say. And I
Okay,
apologize
let's-
for you in person, in public today.
Let's
that-
move
But-
to
no,
the
no,
next
hold on, let me
agenda
finish.
item.
And
You
if for
can-
one
this
I'll make a motion.
Can
you
be
want to
taken
discuss
up
this further, I'll
in
be
a
more than
different
glad-
forum
I'll be more
at
than
a
glad
different
to
time.
discuss with you at any time. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Now, there are 2 more agenda items. I think we should do the quicker one first, and that was several months ago, we passed some, in the spring, we passed some legislation involving problem sidewalks, mostly heavily trafficked, busy intersections, and Councilmember Fahey had some legislation dealing with maybe a DGS fix. Normally, we rely on the adjacent property owner, and you were in agreement with that. You put out an RFP, and I'll let you take it from there. My understanding is you didn't get much of a satisfactory response from the RFP, so maybe you could talk about some other ways of addressing, whether you be with your own staff, whatever, or maybe a new RFP. If you could just bring us up to speed on where we are with the problem intersections that maybe the city has to clean off the sidewalk.
So we put out the RFP, we received, it was actually a bid through the Board of Contract and Supply. We received 1 response. We were going to award it to that 1 respondent. However, Joe tried to contact them to go over their equipment list and, some things that were in the bid. He tried numerous times and they didn't respond back. All right, he tried. So as a result of that, we rejected the bid at that time. It is back out again. The Board of Contract and Supply, Danielle has a copy of it. I think she must have sent it to you already. And it's out now. So if anybody knows anybody, please encourage them to bid. They'll come back and do this.
Okay, so do you think we'll have anything in place for this winter season?
We committed to this program, and we hope to have it. We're committed to this program. It's just that when we started doing our due diligence, the guy couldn't support what he said in the bid he had, and Joe was not too happy about it. So we're going to go out to bid. We did have a couple of people that during the summer have contacted us that we'll reach out to. But we're committed to the program, and I think it's a good test program to clear the handicap parking spaces, yes.
Okay,
The handicap parking process.
so if you would keep, Jack?
No, I just want to commend them for that process, because I know in government, there's a lot of bids that we just accept and we don't actually evaluate them, and then we grant bids and then we're not doing the job. So I want to commend you for looking into those situations.
And we're finding it hard every day to find contractors that want to do work for us. They're having the same shortage, labor shortage that we have. It's amazing. It goes across industries.
Councilmember Fahey, this was your legislation. Do you want to follow up with? any
Yeah, I know, I
questions?
appreciate you putting out the bid, and it's frustrating, and I understand that these are difficult times, and maybe
committed to
that's
the
the
program.
reason nobody's biting at this point. So I appreciate you continuing to put it out and see if we can get something going. Thank you.
The last agenda item is an ordinance regarding trees, and it is Councilmember Anani's ordinance, so I would like to put him on to, Okay, it's ordinance 137220, and it's regarding planting trees in the city of Albany. I'm going to wait for the council member because it's his ordinance, so. Well, did you guys want to comment on it? Since it was It's the ordinance regarding planting trees when trees on city property are cut down. Yeah, he said he is.
We believe that it's a good legislation, but it's too premature. Let's wait till Davis finishes their report, and then we can reassess it from there. We will probably soliciting for you to sponsor a newer version, a steroids version of this version, but we want to wait for Davis to give us that report, which should be done in another 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, if I can note, the code actually, and I don't know when this particular section was written, 345-3, basically envisioned an annual report regarding planting and maintaining of trees. Obviously, we haven't had that, but your tree study, my understanding is you commissioned a tree study that's going on now.
Excuse me?
My understanding is that DGS has commissioned a study of all city-owned trees.
Yes,
and
Davis
that's
Tree
going
Service.
on now.
Davis Tree Service was contracted to figure out which trees are healthy, in their opinion, which trees should be removed, which trees are the current condition of the trees, that existing trees are not new ones. That was in lieu of our 2025 tree program that we announced last year. What our objective is to remove what Davis identifies as extremely dangerous or falling, and then plant a new one first. But until we get that report, we know we have issues in our forestry. We know our forestry is not diverse. We only have, a majority of our trees are ash borer, and we know what happens when they get diseased. The whole forestry gets diseased. So we want to have a balance. So we're not against the proposed legislation. We want to wait for the report so we can make an educated guess on how to proceed with the legislation.
So a couple of questions. When do you think we will have that?
That last time we spoke to Davis, I think they're close to 38,000 trees they have inspected. They're about 3 to 6 weeks out, they said.
Finishing
The report.
the inventory,
Right.
then the report's got to get put together. So I would say a couple months.
Okay. And then in your opinion, should the code be amended or clarified? It seems to require an annual report on trees and shrubs.
We've actually talked to Port Council about looking at this entire code and putting some different language in and doing that, yes.
Okay.
Because this report that we would get wouldn't be an annual thing. It would be a 10-year plan more than likely, a 5 to 10, depending on what they tell us. You know,
Okay.
based on what we need to do.
Okay. But it's still, just a second. Yeah. Okay. But it's still worthwhile for individual citizens to report trees that they think are unhealthy,
That continues, yes.
and you
that
will
continues.
respond to that.
Yes, that's continued.
Okay. Leah?
Mike, I just have a quick question. Is our
Hi,
forestry
Jack.
division up to date with staff? The forestry?
They're,
Is our forestry division staff?
they're up to date. I think they're short one guy, which is returning from line of duty injury. But they're on standby tonight because we expect some weather. All
right, thank you.
Tomorrow. But yeah, the equipment is fairly new. As a matter of fact, they're very happy with the equipment. We invested some money in that division. So
No, I know we did. That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
You're on. Leah?
Thank you. Is it working? Can you hear me? Yeah, all right. So I just wanted to comment on two issues that you just brought up. These comments are mostly from me, the person, not Leah Golby, the person, not the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association. And that is, first of all, I completely forgot about that whole thing with the snow removal, but I'm, disappointed that you didn't find anyone, but really glad that you're rebidding because this will be a game changer, and it's so important. And I really thank you for doing it because it's so important and so desperately needed. Thank you, Councilmember Fahey, for pushing to make sure that the city take snow removal a step further. And on the tree legislation, I do have to say the Pine Hills neighborhood, Councilmember Anani has been very responsive to the membership and the board of the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association with our concerns around trees. And I do believe that those concerns were what prompted that legislation. I personally think that legislation would need work, and I'm glad that he's holding it, or I'm not sure if he's withdrawing it. We'll find out. But, regardless, I think it makes sense not to act on it now when, we're in the middle of this. And I believe I've spoken to him about it. It sounded to me like he was going to withdraw, but I have no idea. But, I do think that the tree inventory is really important, and, just trees are a big issue. Everybody wants more trees until it destroys their property or damages their property, and then they are full of complaints, of which I just got a complaint recently about. So, but in general, that's great. So I just wanted to thank DGS for the tree inventory. I think it's great to be doing.
Thank you. Now, when we had noticed this meeting, I put in a contingency date of August 26th, tentative for continued discussion. I guess my preference now, but I want a consensus on it, is that we won't continue the discussion until we get the report back. If anybody disagrees with me, please do so.
If I can just clarify, in addition to their report, there are numerous documents that should be available that we should be able to get and review. The DOL variance application and their approval. There must have been a work plan for the asbestos removal. There must have been a contract. There must have been an RFP of some sort. The laboratory tests, the inspector's report, all of that should tell us a lot more about what has been done, what the assessment was about the conditions, etc. So all of that is currently available, and that is all part of what I have asked for. So I don't, I look forward to the final, comment. Although, and part of what I am curious about is the extent to which any of these documents reflect the concern about there being garbage bags buried. And Commissioner, I do want to point out that very specifically in my letter to the mayor on June 8th was a request that, not that DGS do anything about the asbestos, because I understand that you should not be doing anything about the asbestos, but that the city hire a certified or a licensed environmental firm to take care of the remediation. And I specifically not only mentioned the tiles and the asbestos, but also the plastic bags, specifically because there's this unknown about what their contents are, what kind of hazard they propose. We do know that that is an area of the park in which there's opportunity there, potentially to do something meaningful with it. People have talked to me about doing pickleball. Some other people have talked about having a dog park. And people have talked about community gardens or adult exercise equipment. Any of those kinds of things could potentially involve future digging, in which then people are bringing up, digging into hazardous substances. So from that standpoint, it's always better to fully remediate and address those kinds of things. So I just want to be clear, I never expected, I wanted it done legally, and one of the reasons why I mentioned back in February of 2001, February of this year, is Randy Milano has unused asbestos abatement bonds that have been carried over year to year. I specifically mentioned that because I did kind of anticipate that it's going to cost a bit to make this right.
That's, I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. I never, probably it was my ignorance saying, well, it's not friable, so it's very, very safe to remove it. I never got that from you saying that we should just go there with shovel. And you're correct. There's potentials there to develop something. I don't know if a dog park might be too tight, but maybe certainly an adult exercise is something that could come down in the future, and we definitely want to participate in that. But we do have a rule at DGS. Whenever we hit a parcel of land, don't dig, build up, because it's such an old town that you never know what you're going to find underneath.
What about, my husband was saying, that was a dump there.
Yes.
It was probably a dump, so, and back in the day, the regulations were totally different than what they are today.
Although I do want to say that it was very interesting when the water department dug in what they thought was a dump under the Babe Ruth field. In all of that area, Neil O'Connor said to me, they dug up the equivalent of a football field, and they said they weren't finding anything. So in terms of all these rumors about where the dump is, I've been told specifically it's really the area where we had the picnic yesterday on the corner of Partridge between the Babe Ruth field. So we keep on hearing different things, but
We thank you for pointing out those asbestos bonds, because that's what we used. That's ultimately what we used. Wasn't
Good.
much left, but that's what we used.
all right.
So, Judy, could you send me a list of documents that you think we should be requesting? But I do want to get a consensus of, do we need August 26th for a formal meeting? I doubt we will have the contractor's report back, but I could certainly forward to them documents that you think they might already have, which would be relevant.
What I could do is tomorrow call the engineering firm, might have the paperwork that you're referring to, because we don't receive it until it's a whole package. I'll ask them what they have and scan it, have them scan it and send it to you, whatever we have. But that's not an official record. That's just the guy coming in signing that he picked up the stuff, or signing that he dropped off the stuff, or whatever. The report would be the final record. But we do have, I'm sure the engineer has those records.
If you have what you think are relevant documents, would you send them to Danielle Gillespie?
Yeah, sure.
And she'll forward them to us. And then Judy, if there's anything else that you think should be in there?
Yeah, I thought I replied all to David Gallen's email in which he provided that outline, and you and Jack were both on that, along with Kelly and Jenny. I just did a reply all and said, this is what I'm asking for. But I'm going to put a reminder in my calendar to make sure I get that to you, because I know we all get a lot of email.
Okay. So I think we have concluded our business. We will not be meeting on the 26th of August. And
Mike, is Councilmember Ananez, are we holding it or withdrawing? All right, thank you.
so I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.